Hello, hi, can everyone hear me? Those that are logged on? No one's answering. It's muted. Hi, how are you? Oh, it's on mute. And my video is on mute too. Yeah, still mute. People are logging in. Oh, what's happening, Josh?
Your audio is not getting across to some reason.
And neither is the video, because it's still got the backdrop.
The video's getting there fine. It's just the audio.
Oh, it's just all I can see is the backdrop.
Yes, yeah. So is this on mic at all? No, mic's on fine. Just keep going.
Yeah. Just if we can tell people that in the chat that we're just experiencing a bit of technical, because I'd asked people to log on at 5 too, so we could start at 6. They can hear me. Hi guys, if you can hear me, we're just fixing up the audio. There's a couple of technical challenges. Andy Flo, I can see you. We'll be on shortly. Apologies for this. Just give us a couple of minutes, we'll be sorted. Okay, everything's coming through. Can everyone hear me now? Those that are on? Yep, I think we're good to go. And then, can people see me? Okay. 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 Oops, now I've gone again. Hi, everyone. I hope you can all see me wherever you're coming in from. Yeah, we're going to start in like 3 minutes. Welcome, Auntie Flo. Sorry, I can't hear anybody. No. Unfortunately, at the moment, you're all muted, so I can't hear you, but I can see the chat. Okay, we're going to start in 2 minutes. We're just waiting for people to log on. Yeah, it is a webinar format, people, so we will unmute you when it's time for you to speak. So you're all muted and you can't unmute yourselves. It's in webinar format. Somebody was asking that question in the chat. Okay, Josh, I'm going to officially start in a minute or so. Good evening, everybody, ladies, gentlemen, from the far corners of the world, those that are coming to us from Brisbane, Sydney, all around Australia, and to anybody who is joining us globally. Welcome, good evening. Welcome to the first event in the Queensland Migrant Women in Business series. This event, we are looking at untapping the unlocked potential of migrant women that are living in Queensland. We've got an amazing panel that's lined up for you this evening. But before we get underway, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Christine Mudavanhu. I am your host for this evening. I'm also your moderator for the panel Q&A that will happen later after the speakers. But before we get underway, I would like to welcome Auntie Flo Watson, who is our guest of honor, who's going to do the acknowledgement of country before we get started. Auntie Flo, over to you.
Myself. Wonderful to be here today, this evening. My name's Flo Watson. I'm an auntie, a friend, a sister, a nana now to many. What I'd like to do is acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on where we stand today, wherever you are. My people are from Yarrabah, which is just south of Cairns. Just in from Green Island, if any of you guys have been there. Those people are the Kunganji people. I'm a traditional owner and an elder there. I'm also from the Woolgoorookabar people of Magnetic Island and Townsville. My great-grandmother was Emily Magnetic. Woolgoorookabar meaning Townsville. And the canoe people of, I'm just trying to check, and the, sorry about this, and the Cookieallegy people of Cape York. Mum was Stolen Generations. We have over 600 to 700 countries around Australia. That's why we do acknowledgement of country or welcome to country wherever we are. In those different countries, there are different clans, and we acknowledge, we have within those clans, we have different countries, and we acknowledge all those countries that are here today. So it's an honour to be here today for this inaugural event, and I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where we are today and where I am. I'm in Bribie Island, so the people of Bribie Island are the Gubbi Gubbi people. And wherever you are, if you're in Brisbane, you're on Turrbal country or Jaguar country. I pay my respects to our elders, past and present, and also to the ancestors who've gone before us and paved the way to where we are today. I acknowledge those from all of you who are here today from your very many nations, and I welcome you all to this prestigious event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Auntie Flo, for that acknowledgement of country. And I too, before I get started, would like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which we meet today. I'd like to acknowledge our elders past, present, future, and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge all the different nationalities that are represented when all the attendees on this call. I'd like to acknowledge our backgrounds and where we come from. So why this event? Why are we doing this conversation? I have been passionate for the past, for as long as I've been, a working woman, as to how do you economically empower people who move to different countries to create a life? How do you overcome challenges and barriers when you've come from a different background and you have chosen to make a foreign country your home? How do you assimilate into the culture, but how do you also bring yourself and realize your full economic and social potential within your adopted country? This has fueled me to participate in a whole variety of community-led initiatives over my time in Australia. I am also part of a national organization called Migrant Women in Business, where I'm working with women across Australia to look at how we can empower women from non-English speaking backgrounds to truly realize their potential. These women face a lot of barriers, barriers of language, barriers of culture, and so many things that we will talk about at different topics throughout the series of this event. So I'd like to acknowledge everybody who is on this call, and I'd like to thank you for making the time to join us for this important conversation. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsors. None of these events happen without people sponsoring us. I'd like to thank the Queensland Government, in particular the Department of Employment, Small Business and Training, who have been an absolute champion of this initiative, who have provided sponsorship, who have provided resources and support to making today happen. Today would not have happened without their support. I'd like to thank Access Community Services, who have been extremely amazing in providing us the event, where you will see all of the conversations and the talks that you will hear today have been recorded. I'd like to thank Naleli Media for all of the PR and marketing that they have provided, and Utano Consulting as well for all of the support in convening and putting this event together. I'd also like to acknowledge our partners. They're people who have come in and worked with us in a strategic way, giving us access to their networks and their database to get the message out of how we can empower migrant women. So I'd like to first of all thank CMS Australia, Australasia, from whose studios we are streaming this event. They've worked with us tirelessly to give us exceptionally good rates that have allowed us to make this event possible with the quality that we wanted this event to be. I'd like to thank BMAC, who also provided the venue where we recorded all of our speakers. They ran around and they bent over backwards to make things happen for us. 4EB Radio, who provided marketing. Women of the World Festival Australia, who have marketed our event throughout their databases. And also you'll be able to see all of the speakers tonight will be also showcased on the WOW website. So you can go there afterwards and visit that and visit any presentations that you might want to see. Oryx Film, who have been the videographers who've been absolutely amazing at working with us. So we'd like to thank all of our partners for being involved in this event. And if anybody's interested in being a sponsor or a partner, we definitely need them to keep these sorts of things going on. We will tell you at the end of this event how you can get involved if that is something that is of interest to you. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker for today. Our first speaker is the Minister for Employment and Small Business and the Minister for Training and Skills Development. She is also the past Minister for Communities, Women and Youth, the former Minister for Child Safety and the Prevention of Domestic and Family Violence. I've met Shannon and the Honourable Shannon Fentiman. I've personally met the amazing Minister on several occasions, and she's exceptionally passionate about the advancement of women, and especially passionate about women in leadership and diversity and inclusion. So without further ado, I'd like to turn to the first keynote presentation for today from the Honourable Shannon Fentiman.
Thank you for inviting me to join this virtual summit. I'm honoured to support this important endeavour to grow the voice of migrant women here in Queensland. As the former Minister for Multicultural Affairs, Communities, Women and Youth, I've been an advocate for a long time for pathways that help people from all backgrounds participate in our economy. This is personal for me. As many of you know, I live and represent one of the most ethnically diverse communities in Queensland. I know the important role that economic engagement plays in building social connections, supporting financial security and independence. This unlocks benefits for individuals and their families, and it helps employers, communities and our economy to grow. With the massive impact of COVID-19, the Palaszczuk government is working hard to support all Queenslanders to recover and get our economy growing again. As the Minister for Small Business and Employment, I've been working hard to support the thousands of small businesses right across Queensland. Our Small Business COVID-19 Adaptation Grants program has made almost $200 million available to assist small businesses transition and keep the doors open. One of the recipients is Brisbane-based FEFAN, an English training company, which is using its grant to establish a cloud classroom to create an online platform for students. They can interact with each other and tutors in real time. Another successful applicant, Cornerstone Migration, which specialises in recruitment in the hospitality industry, was severely affected by COVID, and they've been dedicating time to assist migrants, refugees, students and holidaymakers with free visa services to legalise their status in Australia and hope them post-pandemic. We've also got a program called Mentoring for Growth, which supports business owners with one-on-one advice from small business experts. To assist business owners with navigating through leasing issues during COVID-19, we've also appointed our first Queensland Small Business Commissioner. If you want to find out any more about any of the things I've mentioned or what else is available to help you, please visit our Business Queensland website or call our hotline on 1300 654 687. Supporting migrant women to start a small business is also a passion of mine, which is why I'm such a champion for the Queensland Social Enterprise Strategy and the Advanced Queensland Female Founders Impact Program. Our social enterprise strategy helps grow and develop the sector so they can provide more job opportunities for people who need it most. Meanwhile, the Female Founders Program aims to develop the business skills of women and girls so they can grow their own business, creating their own job. These are extremely worthwhile initiatives, and I encourage you to find out more about how you can participate or take advantage of the support that's on offer. I know that the crisis has made things more difficult for many people, especially women and migrants. So we all need to support each other during these tough times. We need to continue to empower migrant women so that they can become beacons in their communities. We may need to help them connect with support that is already available or build up their self-confidence and motivation to try something new that engages and excites them, like starting their own small business. I know that there is so much potential in our community and certainly a lot of energy. We can't afford to leave anyone behind as Queensland gets back on its feet. Women like yourselves continue to be an inspiration to me and many others right across Queensland. I wish you all the very best in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Fentiman, for that opening address that opens our discussion today. I'd like to get started by introducing our panel. We've got a stellar panel of 5 speakers this evening who are going to be talking to you from different perspectives and different aspects based on their knowledge, based on the areas in government that they work in, based on the areas of research that they work in, and also based on the areas of speciality. First up, we're going to hear from Natasha Doherty. Natasha is the lead partner at Deloitte Access Economics. Natasha is an experienced partner with a demonstrated history of working in the management consulting industry. She's skilled in analytical skills, business case, government, benefit realization, and proposal writing. She's also a strong entrepreneurship professional with a master's focused in health economics and from the University of Queensland. Natasha was the partner that led the research on behalf of Deloitte Access Economics, which published the report, Seizing the Opportunity, Making the Most of the Skills and Experience of Migrants and Refugees, a research report for Multicultural Affairs Queensland, November 28. And it was actually the publication of this research report that started me thinking about this conversation, because this research report really highlighted what the economy was missing out on. And Natasha is going to provide an oversight of how Deloitte has actually managed to quantify what the cost is of Queensland not realizing the full potential of migrants who may be working outside of their areas of expertise. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first panel speaker for this evening, Natasha Doherty.
Good evening, everyone. Lovely to be here with you. Today I'm going to be giving you an overview of the report Seizing the Opportunity, Making the Most of the Skills of Migrants and Refugees in Queensland, a report commissioned by the Queensland Government. This paper explored the skills, the economic and social impact of under-recognition of skills and migrants within Queensland. And the stories you see here on the slide represent the stories that we heard throughout the research that we undertook. These people have lost their culture, their families, their livelihoods, and they left Australia to find another place to be and belong. We can and must do better. This report has got some great attention, and that's why the Queensland Government commissioned it. It's been presented to the federal government, and other states have shown interest. The report is the first of its type, and today I want to focus on 3 key elements highlighted in the report: the economic imperative of addressing this issue, the social impact that it has, and the actions that we can take. This is a map of the journey of 80,000 migrants and refugees over 10 years. And yes, it looks complicated, and that's the point. There are many issues with this story. Issues of people giving up on recognition due to the complex nature of the processes, or even worse, not giving up on the process and still unable to find work aligned with their skills. And furthermore, the discrimination that they experience within the workplace. In the end, only half of migrants and refugees use their skills in the work that they undertake. This means that 40,000 people over the last 10 years have not been utilised to their maximum capacity. And that is a massive loss to our economy and our society. Now, on this slide, I just want to myth bust around some of the views that people hold around migrants and refugees that are not utilising their skills. Of 50% of those not utilising their skills, the most common persona that existed was a female, aged 25 to 34, with high proficiency of English and with a qualification in management and commerce. It really does make you think. Here, we demonstrate the social and economic costs that we identified as part of this study. To inform the economic and social impact analysis, we undertook a review of data and literature to identify the key impacts that we should examine for inclusion in the costing. I'll just highlight a few of these findings. Housing. A 2012 study of the housing characteristics of recent migrants found that 6% of permanent migrants were renting from public housing authorities. Migrants were more likely than their Australian-born counterparts to be renting as recent arrivals. However, this gap narrowed over time. In the health domain, the association between health, including mental health and overall well-being, and labour market status is well established. Several studies explored the link between health and employment outcomes for Australian migrants using data from the longitudinal survey of immigrants to Australia. By controlling for compounding factors like age and skills and education and English language proficiency, poor physical health was associated with a reduced economic participation, and mental health status was negatively impacted by economic participation of male migrants. So the impact on families. Multiple studies link unemployment and inadequate employment to marital strain, particularly when it affects the male partner. Poor labour market outcomes may also have a negative impact on parenting, with higher parental stress levels linked to a reduction in nurturing behaviours. And a reduction in household income and increased household insecurity are associated with lower educational attainment by children. So you can see the long-term impacts that this has on families and children. Productivity. In a research paper for the Department of Immigration and Border Protection, one study examined the earnings as a measure of individual productivity to compare the productivity of migrants and non-migrants, and of migrants from different visa classes. Using data from HILDA, this analysis found that on average, migrants are more productive than non-migrants. However, productivity is linked to English proficiency and post-school qualification. At a population level, they used ABS, Quality Adjusted Labour Input Methodology, to assess the contribution of migrants to workforce skills and productivity growth over the period between 2006 and 2011. Migrants accounted for 0.17 of a percentage point of annual labour productivity growth over that period. And this contribution is attributable to an increase in the skills and qualifications of migrants rather than their time spent in the workforce. Following our research and data review, we found that there was adequate data to only include some of these social and economic costs that were identified in the literature. And they're highlighted in light blue here. As outlined, there's both a price to pay for not recognising the skills and the foregone benefits to society and the economy. And how is it that we are not offering opportunities to the young female commerce student with proficiency in English to bring innovation and enhance productivity in our state? So let's go to the economic-wide impacts. To estimate the quantum of the skill under recognition of migrants and refugees, we undertook an extensive study into the characteristics of recent migrant survey. We looked at both skills from under recognition and skills utilisation, and we considered those to highlight the cohort of interest. The estimate of the skill under recognition from this study, adjusted upwards using population census, covered a 10-year period. And this takes into account both underrepresentation within the QMWIB data over that period. So a result of that estimate we undertook found that 7,800 employed and 2,600 unemployed to be underutilised in terms of the comparison to their highest skill qualification. So that is 10,400 people not utilising their skills within our state. We did some analysis of the main field of study that showed that 60% of those migrants have skills in the areas where we have skill shortages in Queensland. So this 60% is applied to the cohort of skills of under recognition of migrants and refugees, and takes account of the skill demands required within Queensland. Of that, we found that 6,000 of those migrants could be linked to skill underutilised skill needs areas in Queensland. We use these inputs to go into our CGE modelling to then look at what GSP impact that would have within our state. So what did we find? If we turned this around, it's worth $250 million to the Queensland economy, but it's only part of the story. As I said, we couldn't quantify all of the various impacts as a result of skill under recognition. But the modelling demonstrates that if we drive this within our state, this leads to increases in real allocation of labour, to more productive use, and a substantial flow-on effect, which affects GSP overall over the 10-year period. So to better understand the social impacts of skill under recognition, we fielded an online survey focused on migrants and refugees, and we had 700 responses to that survey. We had 20 social impact questions that asked participants to rate their agreement with a number of statements that focused on 4 key areas: job satisfaction, their family, their health, and feelings of belonging to Australia. The answers were assigned a numeric score, and based on that, we were able to look at the relationship between skill under recognition and those 4 key social impact areas. What we found, as expected, is that the relationship between job dissatisfaction and job status. Migrants who were fully utilising their skills reported greater job satisfaction more frequently than migrants who were skill underutilised. And the relationship was in the same direction, but smaller in magnitude for the family impact and the health indice impact. So how do we realise this opportunity? Well, Canada did something about it. They identified that there's an economic and a humanitarian perspective to addressing this issue. And if I was a migrant and I had a choice, I'd choose Canada over Australia any day. We had 40,000 people over the last 10 years of wasted talent. And do we really want to continue to lose that talent? It is within our capability to address this issue by looking at transparency and coordination and fairness, by improving system navigation, and by enhancing local networks and the ability to gain work experience. We really need to seize this opportunity to successfully support migrants and grow our economy. Maybe next time you're in a taxi, you might ask, what's your story? Are they one of the 40,000? So now I want to change tack. I want to change focus. Christine asked me to talk a little bit about the impact that COVID has had on women and migrants. And I just want to give you a bit of a picture of the impact that COVID has had on women and migrants. This graph shows an overall drop in employment as a result of COVID and the disproportionate impact it has had on women. What has been surprising is that employment for women has bounced back faster, but it still has a long way to go to make up the lost ground. But it's not the same in all industries. This graph shows the impact it's had in health and social assistance. The drop for women has been greater in health and social assistance, and the recovery has been faster for men, which I think is very interesting, and we need to continue to monitor these statistics over time. Furthermore, I think we need to think about the starting point for migrant women. Now, the starting point pre-COVID was not pretty, and unemployment rates in November 2019 were 4.3% higher for females born in Australia compared to migrant women. And furthermore, the top industries who employ female migrants have experienced a decline in employment between 4.8 and 9.8%. We're going to need to continue to monitor these trends and explore policy measures that will target these employment challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Natasha, for that very insightful overview on that landmark report. For a copy of that report, you can visit the Department of Local Government Multicultural Affairs and Racing and download it, or download it from Deloitte's website. We'll also have a copy on our website as well. Our next two speakers are from two core government agencies that are at the forefront of leading the advancement of people in business, of women in business, of women in professional development. First up, we're going to hear from Maryanne Kelly, the Deputy Director General of the Department of Employment, Small Business and Training. Maryanne has held leadership roles over 20 years in the Australian, United Kingdom and Queensland government. Maryanne's roles have focused on delivering strategic policies and programs in dynamic, multifaceted and fiscally challenging environments. Maryanne has provided expert policy advice to governments, successfully negotiated national agreements and delivered high-profile programs for the community. Welcome, Maryanne.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners on all the lands in which we and summit attendees are on today. I want to respectfully acknowledge and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the memories, the traditions, the culture and the hopes of the First Nations people. In 2018, I was lucky enough to do a course where Dr. Mary Graham spoke to us. Auntie Mary is a UQ lecturer teaching Aboriginal history, politics and philosophy. She spoke of the importance in Aboriginal culture of person before business. That is, understanding the person you're engaging with, who they are, where they come from, before you deal with the business at hand. I thought this was something incredibly powerful and something we should all embrace in our dealings with people. So I thought before I started today, I'd tell you a little bit about myself, where I come from and who I am. So I was born in a lower middle class family in the southern suburbs of Brisbane. Brought up as in a strong Irish Catholic family. I was the youngest of three, 6 years younger than my brother, my closest brother, and the only girl. Mum looked after us full time. Dad was a lecturer at QUT in engineering. And being the youngest and the only girl, I was incredibly competitive, keen to be as good, if not better than my brothers, despite the age difference. As per my Irish heritage, I believe that almost anything can be dealt with and managed over a substantial meal and a drink. I was taught, with hard work and dedication, you could achieve almost anything. That a good education was paramount, to treat people with respect and value their contribution, not to take myself too seriously, and most of all, be myself. Martin Parkinson, the ex-Deputy Secretary of Prime Minister and Cabinet, in his final speech said, "Where you come from helps define what you value." I would fully agree with him, but I would also say, don't let where you come from confine or restrict who you are. With the right support and advice, we can achieve our aspirations. The Minister has already said in her speech, some of the departments work to support small business owners and entrepreneurs, workers and job seekers, and people looking to use training pathways to improve their career prospects. My team and I work with a wide range of stakeholders and organisations across the employment, small business and training portfolios to help us deliver the best services we can to the community. What I've been impressed with when I joined the department, or since I've joined the department, which is only 9 short months ago and fairly long during COVID, can I say, 9 months, is the dedication of the staff to actually working with the community to help people across the state achieve their goals. Particularly during COVID, where we really don't know what's going to happen next or what's going to hit us next. We are constantly engaging with our stakeholders inside and outside of government, reviewing, tweaking, changing, renewing our projects and our initiatives so we get the best services possible. Like everyone else, we're looking at better ways to work in this environment and how we can help people achieve better outcomes for themselves. The pandemic has highlighted the incredible importance of the small business sector. There are over 400,000 small businesses across the state, providing services and support to people, to customers all across the state, and employing almost 1 million people. Going back to the 2016 census, we know that women owned about 1/3 of small businesses. We also know that about 28% of small business owners were born outside of Australia, and around 13% spoke a language other than English. Thanks to Natasha for that great presentation on the research that they did. What I found fascinating in that research, and really speaks to the training agenda, is that around 50% of skilled migrants are not using their skills and experience gained before coming to Australia. It also estimated, and again, as someone who worked at Treasury for a very long time, dear to my heart, that the economy would be $250 million larger in 10 years if the skills of migrants were utilised. The Queensland Government's economic plan, which was launched by the Premier in late August, has 6 key pillars. Importantly, 2 of them are small business and skills. For small business, the objective is helping small business, the backbone of our economy, thrive in a changing environment. Throughout the COVID pandemic, small business owners have needed to change the way they work, adjust their business plans to account for different restrictions, and at the same time, keep looking to make their businesses profitable and keep their doors open. We've seen food businesses who have had restrictions on the number of customers that can dine in, do takeaway, or ramp up home delivery. We've seen other businesses step up to produce different products and services, such as medical PPE and other products that were in immediate demand, but affected by supply chain disruptions. Earlier this month, the Premier announced that 25% of face masks, ventilators and sanitisers would be purchased in Queensland. This aligns with the Queensland Government's commitment to engage small or medium enterprises to deliver 25% of the state's procurement by value this financial year. For existing businesses, changing the way they work costs money. And the small business adaptation grants and the job support loan scheme that the Minister mentions in her presentation have been headline programs. These provide financial support to established businesses to get advice, pay overhead, buy new equipment, deliver new services. This will help them find their way through the tough times, help protect jobs now, and hopefully unlock opportunities for the future. So far, more than 17,000 grants have been provided to small businesses across the state, equating to about $154 million. Businesses outside of Southeast Queensland can still apply for those grants, and you can get up to $10,000 per business. So I would encourage people outside of Southeast Queensland to go to the Business Queensland website, see what the eligibility criteria is and apply if you're eligible. One of the other department's key programs is the Mentoring for Growth program, which offers business owners access to volunteer business experts who can assist them in helping understand the challenges they face, how to overcome them, and also to identify opportunities to grow. You can register to be connected to an experienced mentor online, or you yourself can volunteer to be a mentor. I'm sad to say that of around the 600 mentors that we have at the moment, only 13 are from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. We would love to expand that pool. So if you're an experienced business person out there who's keen to help businesses get ahead, overcome challenges, find opportunities, I strongly encourage you to go online to the Business Queensland website and apply or show your interest in becoming a mentor. Another key program managed by the department is the Back to Work program. Now, this program is designed to encourage businesses to employ a Queenslander who's been unemployed. In other words, we provide support payments to employers who hire a previously unemployed person. As part of the Queensland Government's response to COVID-19, they've expanded and extended this program. We now have a new apprentice and trainee payment of up to $20,000 to employers who take on an apprentice or trainee or person who's been unemployed. Total funding in the pool for this financial year is $70 million. I'm really pleased to say that 80% of the payments up to the 30th of June this year have all gone to small businesses, 80%. And of the 23,000 people that have been employed as part of the program, around 1,500 are from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. So I've spoken about a few of the programs that DESBT in particular provides to small business to support them. But there's a whole range of initiatives and support and advice available, both at state and local level. The best place to keep up to date on what's available and find out if you're eligible or not is the Business Queensland website, or you can actually register for our regular newsletter. Now, I mentioned earlier that one of the 6 pillars of the Queensland Government Economic Plan is skills. Ensuring Queenslanders have the skills they need to find meaningful jobs and set up pathways for the future. The aim here is to support productivity through developing the skills we need now and in the future, to support faster recovery for individual businesses, but also for the economy as a whole. In our department, we are acutely aware of the power of training to change lives. The Queensland Training Awards, which we hold every year, celebrate the vocational and education training sector and celebrate those people that sector has supported. This slide has Rebecca Deng on it. Rebecca is a young woman from South Sudan who was named as a regional finalist for the School-Based Apprentice or Trainee of the Year in the North Coast region. Rebecca is studying a Certificate 3 in hairdressing with Sion Salon while completing her high school certificate at St. Columba's College in Caboolture. She sees the skills and knowledge that she is gaining through this opportunity as a way to provide services to the multicultural clients in her community. One of our most popular new training offerings are a range of micro-credentials in different skills. To date, there's been about 10,000 completions of these courses online. Now, micro-credentials are shorter, focused training in specific skills to support small business and employees to adapt, improve their productivity. We have 2 online training hubs, the Small Business Skills Hub and the Skills Focus Queensland. They offer people a targeted range of courses to improve their business or as an employee to improve the skills that they can offer an employer. Training offerings in the Small Business Skills Hub can be found at qldskills.com.au and include a wide range of offerings. Things like foundational skills in sales, finance, human resources, leadership skills in building and managing teams, in personal well-being, in mental health, and digital skills like cybersecurity and business systems. We're currently working to expand the variety of offerings and hope to have some announcements on that soon. Through our Skilling Queenslanders to Work initiative, Skilling Queenslanders for Work initiatives, we are delivering local projects across the state that prepare people from a variety of backgrounds to join the workforce or go on to future study. Projects have included delivering the Certificate 3 in micro-business operations to help people from multicultural backgrounds to develop their own small business plans or establish their own operations. Since July 2015, Skilling Queenslanders Work has supported close to 3,500 women from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. Since 2015, Multicultural Australia has been funded just over $9 million to deliver 41 Skilling Queensland for Work initiatives. That has assisted around 1,000 Queenslanders, and so far about 50% of the participants have secured employment as a direct result of participating in the program. As part of the government's response to COVID-19, we've actually expanded the program and added an extra $10 million to the current funding round for projects across the state, and the total amount available is about $42 million. Applications are still open and close on the 8th of October. Now, I started on a personal note and thought I would end on one. When I was in my mid-20s, I was studying and working part-time at the West Moreton Migrant Resource Centre as a community development worker. While I was there, I supported a small migrant women's group. Every Thursday, I'd jump in the centre's bus and I'd drive around Goodna and Redlands and pick up the local women, usually to spend a couple of hours doing arts and crafts activities. I also made sure that I got services from across the region and state to come and speak to those women about the services, personal and financial support that was available to them and their families. Very few of the women spoke English, but somehow we made it work. Between myself, the one Vietnamese woman, one El Salvadorian woman, we actually worked with the whole group to make the program work. While the nature of the support I provided in those days was extremely basic, it was one of the most rewarding jobs that I've ever done. I'm proud to say that in my current role, we provide far better and far more sophisticated support services and programs. If you want to find out more about anything that I've spoken about today or other Queensland Government programs, please go to the Business Queensland website, business.qld.gov.au, or call our small business hotline on 1300 654 687. The translating and interpreting service is available in your language if you request it. We continually update these channels to ensure that we have the most up-to-date advice on the services, support and information both at an Australian, state and local government level. So I strongly encourage you to go to either the hotline or to the website. Thank you for your time today, and I look forward to our question and answer session later.
Thank you very much, Maryanne, for that overview of the programs that are provided by your department. I move on next to our next speaker, who is Heidi Mathieson. Heidi is the Manager for Office for Women for the Department of Child Safety, Youth and Women. As Manager for Office for Women, Heidi provides advice on policy and strategy to address inequality and disadvantage and gender issues across Queensland. Heidi works across government, the private sector, community, educational institutions, industry partners to influence change on issues affecting the future of women and girls across Queensland. Over to you, Heidi.
Hi everyone, my name's Heidi Mathieson. I'm the Manager of the Office for Women in the Department of Child Safety, Youth and Women. I'm here today to talk to you about Queensland Women's Strategy, Diversity in Leadership and the Women on Boards initiative. I'd also like to start by paying my respects to the First Nations people of the places where we all join this gathering today. So firstly, the Queensland Women's Strategy. Despite the positive changes made to women's status and roles over the past century, gender inequality unfortunately persists in our community. Inequality restricts women's ability to participate fully in the social, economic and cultural opportunities that Queensland offers. And this has negative impacts for the whole community. The Queensland Women's Strategy recognises that women are vastly underrepresented in leadership positions, particularly on boards of management. Women are more likely to work in a narrow range of lower paying occupations and continue to be underrepresented in traditionally male-dominated industries and occupations. Women take primary responsibility for unpaid domestic work and caring for dependents and vulnerable people. And women are vastly overrepresented as victims of sexual offences, stalking, and domestic and family violence. As a society with gender equality promotes and protects women's rights, interests, and well-being, and ensures women's maximum participation in all aspects of society, which in turn leads to better social and economic outcomes for everyone. The vision set out in the Queensland Women's Strategy is that our community respects women, embraces gender equality, and promotes and protects the rights, interests, and well-being of all women and girls. And everyone has a role to play in achieving gender equality. So the Women's Strategy outlines 4 priority areas: participation and leadership, economic security, safety, and health and well-being. Let's focus today on leadership. The evidence is out there. Diversity at the highest levels of leadership provides tangible benefits. Organisations with diverse and inclusive leadership demonstrate better financial performance, access the widest talent and skills pool available to them, and are more responsive to their clients and stakeholders. Research that the Office for Women commissioned from Deloitte, Access Economics, backed this up. In particular, the research showed that achieving gender parity on boards would increase productivity in Queensland by 87 million per annum. High-performing boards consist of both men and women and are committed to diversity and are highly inclusive. Change requires commitment. Organisations need to take concrete action to remove barriers. And it found that courageous decision makers who step up and actively challenge the status quo will be the drivers of change in Queensland. This has been demonstrated by the Queensland Government through its targets for gender parity on Queensland Government boards and bodies. With a commitment to change, gender parity on boards can be achieved. In 2015, the Queensland Government set targets that there would be 50% women's representation on Queensland Government boards and bodies by 2020. When those targets were set, only 31% of board members were women. But the 50% by 2020 target was reached in September 2019. And this year, in June 2020, 54% of positions on government boards are filled by women. So it shows that with commitment to change, greater diversity can be achieved. There's really 3 key groups of people with the capacity to affect positive change across all types of Queensland boards. They are the key decision makers in organisations, so the individuals who are already in those positions, they might be government ministers, they might be department officers, they might be CEOs, management, they might be corporate or HR directors. They have the authority to advocate for and make decisions that directly influence the diversity and gender composition of a board. Existing board members have a role. Those on boards have the authority to advocate for diversity and to directly influence the climate of inclusion in the boardroom environment. Recruiters, individuals who play a role in promoting vacancies, seeking applicants, and identifying potential board candidates, have a role to play as well. All these people can take action to address the systemic barriers through a range of mechanisms. So what are some of these systemic ways that we can address diversity on boards? Well, the vision and strategy. An organisation needs to have an authentic vision for diversity and inclusion that sets out a clear roadmap for change. Governance. There needs to be senior level oversight of the diversity and inclusion strategies. Appropriate resources need to be allocated. Leadership. The leaders across the whole organisation need to be committed to diversity and inclusion and behave inclusively and need to be held accountable for outcomes. Systems and processes. Inclusive talent management processes need to be designed to support the attraction, engagement, and retention of diverse talent. Specific initiatives. Support for interventions targeted at specific demographic groups will drive change. Data and metrics. Data must be collected, collated, and regularly monitored to measure performance. And branding and culture. Organisations must know that their external communication, their partnerships and their actions reinforce their leadership commitment to diversity and inclusion. So these are all ways we try to address the systemic issues. For people watching today, you might be also wondering, what can I do to secure a board position? It's something I'm asked about regularly. Yes, there are tangible steps you can take to prepare yourself for a board position. Firstly, learn about the different types of boards: public sector, private sector, and not-for-profit boards. There's hundreds of public sector boards out there. There's the government boards of Queensland. There's different types. They might be focused on trading, governance, policy, regulation, or they might perform an advisory or consultative role. They're usually driven by public interest considerations. Private sector boards are profit-driven and include small and large companies, unlisted companies, and publicly listed ASX companies. Directors of private sector boards have a duty to act in the best interests of the company, exercise due care and diligence, and avoid conflict of interest. Not-for-profit boards. They support organisations that provide services to support the community. They're often charity organisations and they operate for social purposes such as supporting health, aged care, education, social services, recreation, community support. Sitting on the board of a not-for-profit can be a really great way to start for those without any board experience at all. So take a look at what you've got to offer and think about, do you have what it takes to serve on a board? You need to understand the particular duties and responsibilities of a board role that you might be interested in. You need to have sufficient knowledge of the organisation, the sector, or the industry relevant to the board position. And you need to have enough time to commit to being a diligent board member. Take a look at your knowledge, qualifications, skills, and attributes. If you've got gaps, work on a specific plan to fill your gaps. Take a look at the webinars and guides on the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission website. They're written in plain English and especially helpful for understanding financial duties and administrative responsibilities when you're sitting on a board. To prepare yourself, consider finding a mentor. Board shadowing might also be an option. And there's a whole range of educational options you can also consider. You'll also need a board-ready CV that is particularly relevant to this position and reflects knowledge, skills, and attributes that the board is looking for. When you're ready, put yourself out there, but please note, you don't have to be 100% ready. There's a whole range of skills you can contribute right now, and many of you will continue to learn along the way. But where do you find vacancies? Anyone interested in serving on a Queensland Government board can register and submit a CV to the Queensland Register of Nominees website, or also known as the QRON website. When a position becomes available, your details are matched with the criteria for the vacancy, and you might be contacted for more information. We'll make sure that the web links are available to you after the presentation. You should also regularly monitor smart jobs, departmental websites, social media, and other online government communication platforms for Queensland Government board vacancies. Each department and its recruitment processes are a little bit different. If you're considering serving on a not-for-profit board, you could use the board position matching service on the Institute of Community Directors Australia website. The Institute also offers events and courses for aspiring not-for-profit board members. The Queensland Government Women on Boards website provides a huge range of resources to help you get prepared and explore your options when it comes to finding a board position. Visit the website, take action today. Again, the web address we'll provide after the presentation. To finish up, I want to say not only could you benefit from a board position, but Queensland benefits when you get involved. So please do. Thanks very much. I look forward to questions afterwards.
Thanks very much, Heidi, for that insight into how women who are aspiring to be on boards can get on boards and the Queensland Women's Strategy. Our final presentation this evening is a case study that's focused on the health sector. The health sector is a major employer of migrants in the community. Today, we've got two speakers that will be talking about that particular case study focused on the Moraa refugee health system. So we've got Natasha Saki, who's the director of Moraa Refugee Health. And she's worked over the past 12 years with the Moraa and the UQ Centre for Integrated Care and Innovation. The centre has a strong focus on evaluation, research, and implementing new models of care. Doherty oversees 3 key refugee areas of health: Moraa Refugee Complex Care, Moraa Integrated Refugee Services, and the Refugee Health Network. So, together with Doherty, we actually have Moraa Nyanchoga from the Refugee Health Network. Moraa was born and raised in Nairobi, Kenya. She obtained her Bachelor of Science and Bachelor of Surgery in the University of Nairobi. Moraa will be talking both from her experience of working with the network, but also from her own personal experience as a skilled migrant who has migrated here in Queensland, and some of the challenges that she has faced. She'll also be giving insight into the refugee network, which is an area of expertise for her. Without further ado, I turn over to Moraa and Doherty for their presentation.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity for being with you tonight. My name's Doherty Saki. I'm the Director of Moraa Refugee Health, and
good evening. Thanks so much for having me as well. My name is Moraa, and I work for the Refugee Health Network Queensland.
We'll begin tonight just acknowledging the land that we're gathering on and past, present, and emerging leaders. Today's presentation will really focus on some of the issues that the other presenters have brought out, but with a focus on the practical elements or a case study to actually illustrate what the barriers and enablers are with regards to getting your skills recognised in the health context. So maybe I'll start off by way of introduction, explaining that Queensland launched its first refugee health policy and action plan in 2017. Along with the policy, Queensland Health also funded the inaugural Refugee Health Network Queensland. The network is auspiced by Moraa, and its aim is to build capacity and partnerships to improve the health and well-being of people from a refugee background. And I just want to draw your attention to to one of the 64 actions, which is to develop a multicultural workforce. So I guess the question is, why did the Moraa get involved? Moraa is essentially a Catholic mission-driven organisation with a tradition for meeting unmet community need. It has been delivering refugee health services since 2002, and it has a very strong community engagement focus and model. We have also piloted a successful assistant in nursing internship program for nurses qualified from a refugee background. That program was funded through Philanthropic and Multicultural Affairs Queensland funding. And I'll mention that a little bit more later on. But crucially, we were able to mobilise clinicians with a very strong commitment to mentoring overseas trained doctors. And given our role in refugee health and in collaboration with the settlement services, I guess we were a natural point of contact for a lot of international medical graduates or IMGs from refugee background.
Now let's look at the global statistics. At the end of 2019, there are 79.5 million forcibly displaced persons around the world. And of these, 26 million were refugees. By definition, a refugee is a person who is forced to flee from their country of origin due to war, conflicts, fear of persecution due to a number of reasons like race, religion, nationality, among other reasons. It is important to understand that refugees have a different journey to the migrants. A migrant, as myself, we come to Australia due to a number of reasons, which are mostly planned, work, study, which is very different from the refugee journey. Let us now look at the local situation in Australia. Approximately 18,750 humanitarians are welcomed into Australia annually. In 2018-19, the top 3 countries which were source of the refugees were Iraq, Congo, and Myanmar. Queensland consistently settles around 11 to 12% of this overall intake. Refugee Talent, which is a social enterprise with an online platform that connects refugees to employment opportunities in Australia, has registered approximately 52 international medical graduates across Australia from a refugee background that want to re-enter the medical profession. The pathways for overseas trained doctors and nurses to practice in Australia is very complex and can be very challenging, and especially if you're from a refugee background. This slide will give an overview of the recognition, registration, and employment pathway for both overseas trained nurses and doctors. We will, however, focus our case study on the standard pathway, which is essentially the pathway that most international medical graduates from a refugee background will take. So for the standard pathway, you have to pass the Australian Medical Council exam part 1, which is a written exam, pass the Australian Medical Council 2, part 2, which is a clinical exam. And you also have to pass a mandatory English exam, which expires after every 2 to 3 years. As well, you have to meet the requirements of the APRA and the Medical Board of Australia. You have to pass the English language skills as mentioned earlier. You have to have the recency of practice and have a letter of employment. It is important to note that we are not talking about the diluting of these processes, because we want to ensure quality and also safety standards in our hospitals. What we are talking about is just that additional support for this particular cohort, because we know that the refugee journey is very unique and comes with very many challenges associated with it. This will be illustrated in the following case study.
So thanks, Moraa. So whilst we're not discussing the nursing pathway, I just wanted to briefly highlight the Assistant in Nursing Internship Pilot Program, which was funded by Multicultural Affairs Queensland and based in our Mathieson Refugee Complex Care Clinic. Jordanis is our 3rd and final intake for the pilot program, and we are currently seeking for additional funding. She now has her registration and is applying for grad positions. Our 2 previous assistant in nursing interns have both secured jobs in the nursing field. But now we would like to introduce you to Dr. John and Dr. Manal, who both completed observerships with the MADA and are now working at Redcliffe Hospital. And the following case study will focus specifically on Dr. Manal's journey. So let me introduce our case study for this evening. Like many international medical graduates from a refugee background, Dr. Manal has many years' experience, and in her case, she specialised as an anaesthetist in Iraq. She was forced to flee from Mosul because of ISIS and arrived in Australia in 2016. Dr. Manal recounts how difficult it was to obtain the right information at the right time about the AMC pathways and all the various requirements for registration. While managing all the settlement challenges, such as re-establishing her life in Australia, getting housing, finding her way around the cultural nuances of Australia, she also worked incredibly hard to study for the AMC1 and pass the English exam. However, she, like many other migrant and refugee background individuals, found it hard to get employment due to lack of experience. And I think this was very well highlighted in the report from Natasha. I met Dr. Manal at a meeting which was organised by the Department of Home Affairs to discuss employment pathways. And soon I realised that there were no potential employers around the table. The lack of opportunity for gaining local experience, even securing an observership, was a huge stumbling block. It was at this point that MADA Refugee Health began engaging with MADA clinical directors and executives in the hospital in order to start to craft a free pilot observership program. Dr. Manal and Dr. John were the first to trial the observership, which included rotations in the emergency department, infectious diseases, cardiac, and our Moraa Refugee Complex Care Clinic. For Dr. Manal, it was especially exciting to have supervision from a Moraa anaesthetist and be back in an operating theatre in an Australian hospital. The 3-month observership extended to 6, then it extended to 9 months, which gave time for Dr. Manal and Dr. John to build confidence, knowledge of the Australian health system, and most importantly, build professional networks. Moraa Refugee Health then went on to support Manal and John to apply for which is most common way of getting employment, the Queensland Health RMO or Resident Medical Officer campaign, which is once a year. However, because of the lack of experience, minimum requirement being 6 months in Australia or an equivalent country, they were automatically excluded from the first round offers. With additional support and advocacy from the MARTA, coupled with an understanding of where Queensland Health was short on doctors, a connection was made with Redcliffe Hospital, which was still looking to fill junior house officer positions. Dr. John and Dr. Manal applied for these positions, and by working with the Redcliffe Hospital, and especially their clinical training director in this process, by providing local references from the MARTA clinicians who were observing John and Manal and assuring that MARTA would continue to offer peer support, they were successfully appointed. Dr. John and Dr. Manal have since commenced in January, February this year at the Redcliffe Hospital. They've passed all their rotations and are now moving into level 2 supervision and are well on their way to registration. Interestingly, both have commented to me on how important it was to start in a junior house officer position, regardless of their previous clinical experiences, as they stated that the system in Australia is so very different that they require time and support to reach their full capacity.
Thank you so much, Donata, for giving us an overview of that case study. So what have we learned and identified from this case study? The following slide will highlight some of the key barriers and enablers that international medical graduates from a refugee background have to face. Being an international medical graduate myself, although not from a refugee background, I can attest to some of these barriers. The Australian Medical Council exams are very difficult and are very expensive. The AMC2 exam, which is a clinical exam, is even more difficult to pass without the local Australian experience. In addition to that, the English exams, as mentioned before, are very expensive and has an expiry date, which means you have to resit them every 2 to 3 years. Even with passing of MC1, 2, and English exams, without that local experience, it is really difficult to find work, as highlighted in the following case study. This is even harder with big gaps in practice, which most of these IMGs from a refugee background have to face because of their unique journey. Gaps in practice of more than 3 years need a very high level of supervision, and essentially that means starting from a junior position in a hospital, as in the case of Dr. Manal. The documentation process, including the certificate of good standing, which also expires after 6 months, needs to be obtained from countries of origin, and you can imagine they can't really go back to the countries of origin because of the war and conflict. Given all these challenges that we've discussed today, our Australian health system is not always willing to modify the usual practices to build a more equitable pathway. In fact, there's often an active mistrust of people who may come from very different backgrounds, and we cannot discount how unconscious bias plays a role in the employment decisions. On the positive side, international medical graduates from a refugee background are highly motivated, they're permanent residents, they're multilingual, most of them, and they're also very cross-culturally skilled to work in a multicultural population in Australia. And what is needed is the collaboration between the health departments, the clinicians, and managers to invest in a more equitable pathway.
So really, in conclusion, what are we recommending, and what we would like to, I guess, encourage everyone that's listening tonight to think about is some key things that we need to try and advocate and implement. Firstly, I think we have to acknowledge that the issue of employment, the issue of recognising overseas skills, etc., does require a partnership, first and foremost, with the actual international medical graduates or the communities that they come from, employers, registration bodies and clinicians, and the Department of Health and Government. We also have identified that a one point of call or an initial accurate information point is vitally important, especially for doctors and nurses, because there is a lot of misinformation and it can actually delay the whole process of getting access to the pathway. Secondly, we need to develop an equitable and sustainable workforce strategy, which does not undermine the robust quality and safety processes in place for overseas skill recognition, but it ensures equity. We would recommend that more hospitals offer observerships and work experience opportunities. From the MARTA's experience, we would recommend that 2 candidates at a time be provided with the observership, because they offer crucial peer support to each other, and hospitals are a very complex and difficult context for new arrivals. We would strongly advocate the Queensland Government has a role in providing additional resources to hospitals willing to mentor and support IMGs from refugee background in order to give time to clinicians and supervisors to actually do good supervision. Coupled with this, we would like to see a more formalised peer support program to assist in preparation for the exams, and also provide an opportunity, a really important opportunity, to discuss both the Australian clinical guidelines, but the cultural nuances and expectations, which are very, very important to understand in a health context. And also, of course, provide valuable networking with other health professionals and other managers and people within that context. Lastly, but most importantly, we would advocate to Queensland Health to identify targeted positions within their resident medical officer program for IMGs. That will guarantee that there'll be a pathway. We need to ensure equitable access to employment, which takes into account the specific challenges faced by IMGs from refugee background, including, as Moraa quite rightly said, the well-documented issues around registrations with APRA. A small concerted investment upfront will gift the Australian health system highly trained and multicultural doctors. Ultimately, this will also provide great benefits to IMGs who are not from a refugee background and to our broader community. And on this very last slide, I'd just like to leave us with thinking about this, that embracing this diversity will make our health system stronger, more responsive and equitable. It is our gain. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Moraa and Donata, for that wonderful case study that you've provided, and really highlighting the challenges and barriers that are faced in the health sector. And we know the critical shortages that are faced in the health sector. And we've also heard from Natasha earlier on talking about the untapped potential. And so that 250 million, that value to Queensland, a large part of that is in the health sector, where people's potential is not being fully realized. Now we move to the question and answer section. So we're going to unmute our panel members. We've got some questions that are up that have been asked by attendees. If you could please put your questions in the question and answer function that is there on Zoom, and we'll take those questions in the order that they were provided. So if we could unmute the panel, I'll start with the first question. Hi, hello. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Welcome from your various homes today.
Hi, Christine.
Okay, so the first question that we have has been asked by one of the attendees. If you could put up the question. So Monica Bradley asked the question, and I might direct this question over to Maryanne, actually, to open up our Q&A, because I think you're in a position to give some insight into some thoughts around this question. So the question is, the Queensland Government has done a great job in board diversity and inclusion to drive change in the private NFP and listed boards, would the Queensland government consider giving procurement to companies that have greater diversity and inclusion? Maryanne, I might get you to kick off answering that. Is Maryanne there? Okay, if we can't hear Maryanne, we're not sure what's happening. Heidi, I might turn that over to you from a government perspective.
Sure. So the question was about
procurement. If the Queensland government, so the Queensland government,
okay.
In your presentation, you highlighted how well they're doing in driving diversity in public sector boards. So the question is specifically to have similar outcomes in the private sector and NFP and listed boards. Would the government consider giving procurement to companies that have greater diversity and inclusion?
Well, it's a great question, and I think it's something that I think procurement policy is certainly recognised as a way to influence the private sector. The Queensland government has introduced the Queensland Indigenous Procurement Policy, which some people may know about. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how that influences and how that could be broadened to kind of influence right across all the different culturally and linguistically diverse groups that we have in Queensland.
Thank you very much for that, Heidi. I might go over to Natasha from Deloitte, from a private sector perspective. Do you think procurement is an effective tool to increase and encourage diversity on boards for the private sector?
I think it could be. I think it would need to be done in the right way. So we'd need to think really carefully about how we go about implementing it. But I've just actually been participating in an international conference this week called Social Values, or Social Value Matters. And they talked a lot about social procurement and using procurement to promote better outcomes in society. So, I mean, government is a large purchaser of products in society. And so, like, what better way to use that mechanism to think about how you distribute those funds to encourage better social outcomes as well. And I think one of those could be around diversity inclusion. It could be about diversity of the organisations that are a part of that contracting, you know, being women and migrants and all of the aspects of diversity that we think about in our economy. So I think it goes more broadly than just diversity and inclusion on boards, but thinking about social procurement in a very broad sense. I think it's could be quite advantageous.
Thank you for that. Our next questions come from Sissy Ma. So Sissy's first question is, I've listed on the Queensland Government website for a few years now, but never got an opportunity from it. Do I need to re-register every now and then? Heidi, that might be a question for you, which is regards to getting opportunities through the Queensland Government Board's website.
Sure. So no, you don't need to re-register every year. Once you're on the register, you're there. But I think it's really worth having a look at your CV and updating it regularly. So recruiters are going to be able to see how old your CV is, and they're going to want to, you know, look for someone that's provided fairly recent information and not having CVs that are really old. And it's really worth updating your CV with your most recent experience. So I would think that you'd want to jump on there and update your details fairly, you know, regularly, maybe annually, to make sure that you've got the best chance possible to attract a recruiter.
Thanks for that, Heidi. And the second question from Sissy as well says, I remember reading somewhere, stop fixing the women, fix the system. We have all the experience and ability to get on boards, but need to change the way boards are recruited. They are still mostly referrals and experience-based. That is, you need to be known to other board members and recruiters, and you need to have done board roles elsewhere. Existing female members are asked to apply, so some have 5 or 6 roles when first-time board members don't get a chance. How can government change this? So this is really looking at how can governments influence giving those women who don't necessarily have any experience being on boards, who aren't necessarily in the right networks, of which a lot of migrant women are in that space, what can be done actively, or what is being done actively to increase first-timers to be on boards. So Heidi, unfortunately, it comes back to you again from Women on Boards perspective.
Yeah, so I think they're really, really good points, that we're not just targeting our information at women and saying how they need to change. We've also really tried to look at what needs to change from an organisational perspective, and what leaders, recruiters and people in positions of power in those organisations can do to influence those issues. But you know, government influence is somewhat limited. That's why we found it's really important to kind of highlight the achievements that have been made through setting targets for government boards. So we kind of talk about those achievements wherever we possibly can. And I think moving forward, we're going to really increasingly turn our focus, you know, to other areas of the economy, and how we can talk to or other organisations in the private sector and the not-for-profit sector about what they can do. And in this period of time with COVID and needing to recover economically, I think the argument about harnessing the skills and experience of all the diverse population of Queensland is a really good one. So I totally agree with you there. But we've put together the Women on Boards website to try and provide as many resources as we possibly can to help address some of those issues as well. So I'd encourage you to have a look at that.
Okay, excellent. Ronwin's asked a question about the impact of COVID to women. So there was statistics and information that was given in the presentations about the impact of COVID on women. Natasha talked about that in her presentation. And the question is, has the impact of COVID to women been partially due to school-aged children being sent home and women being traditional caregivers? Natasha, I might pose that to you.
Sorry, I was just trying to find the unmute. Yeah, that may well be one of the issues that has driven the stats that we're looking at. We're not 100% sure in terms of what underlies that, and I think
the question below that Grace has.
I think more analysis and more information will bring that to light as we move further forward. I think the thing that I think is really shocking is the degree to which you know, women have either exited the workforce, whether that be because of caring roles and the like, or have lost their jobs. And I think there'll be a little bit of both of those. And I think a lot of women are in those retail, hospitality, tourism-related roles that are going to take a lot longer to recover as we move into the recovery phase. And I think we need to, as a society, collectively, not just government, think about how we address that going forward. And I think the diversity issues we've spoken about today will be really key to that, because not only are women suffering from job losses and potential income reduction over this period, but they're also being disproportionately affected by things like domestic and family violence, which has seen an uptick over this period. And so there are lots of complex dynamics going on in society that collectively we need to think about tackling as we get to the other side of this. And I think we need to be stronger in our gender focus than we ever have been before. And I really hope that we don't lose momentum that we've had up to this point, and that we can, I guess, try to use this as an opportunity to rethink about how we think about policy and business responses to issues like domestic violence and the gender-related issues that, and equities that exist in society, whether that be in business or other places. So long answer, I'm just super passionate about this particular area and the intersex of gender and outcomes for women. And I just think we need to have a greater focus on it as we move to the next stage.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you very much for that, Natasha. Donata, I might turn a question that I have over to you. You gave a very insightful presentation, and you also gave a case study that looked at observerships. I'm interested, given that the medical field is actively always recruiting for qualified, trained personnel, why has it been so difficult to see meaningful change in the medical sector in terms of all the barriers that were outlined so eloquently in your presentation? We have skill shortages right now. My understanding from the information you provided, we actually have qualified people here right now without bringing them into our borders. And COVID has highlighted that situation. Why is this so difficult? And what needs to be done? What needs to be lobbied in order for more change to be seen?
I think that it's a complex question to answer, because the recruitment into the medical field, especially for doctors, is quite a complicated field and process. We seem to be very keen to bring international medical graduates from certain countries. So we don't seem to have a problem in bringing UK graduates, American graduates, so English-speaking graduates into Australia. And that's probably due to familiarity and comfort. We seem to have a bit more challenges around people who are already here and perhaps, have had gaps in their practice, perhaps don't have all of the boxes ticked that we talked about in the presentation, which means that the health system probably needs to work a little bit harder in terms of modifying their recruitment practices and their means of getting registration and access to employment. As I said earlier in the piece with the presentation, we're not advocating for a weakening of the quality standards and accreditation processes. That's not what we're talking about at all. Because there are very good reasons why we've got the accreditation boards and we have the exams and the processes in place. But what we're actually saying is that we do have people living here who are permanent residents who may have had gaps in practice, not because of any fault of their own, but because of the experience that they've had and the journey of coming to Australia. With a little bit of an investment and a little bit of support, they're actually going to be able to be a great resource. And I think the Deloitte report that Natasha references clearly articulates the benefits to the economy and to the system if we actually think more creatively in how we engage around it. The medical profession for many years has had, I guess, a bit of a closed shop in some of the specialties, but we're not even talking about specialties. We're actually talking about entry level. And what's needed, I guess, is the government, Queensland government, and Queensland Health in particular, to take some leadership around this and actually invest in this and bring clinicians, employers, and the overseas graduates together along on this journey. And we've demonstrated through our case study that it is possible, but to make it sustainable, you actually need to invest in that process, in that journey.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Now, we've got other questions that unfortunately in our time we were not able to get to. So what we'll do is we'll take those questions on notice from people and we will get them to the relevant departments. We've got your emails and we'll attempt to get those questions answered to you via email. I'd like to thank Minister Fentiman. I'd like to thank Auntie Flo. I'd like to thank our panel today for really an outstanding presentations that you gave. Very, very insightful. I'm sure everybody who tuned in, we learned a lot. Our next event will be on the 30th of October, where we'll have a different set of speakers and we will be talking and hearing from migrant women and their stories that they've experienced in their challenges to the rise of the top of their ladder in either their careers or in business. So if you want more information about that, please tune into our website, www.qldmwibsummit.com.au, and look at the event on the 30th of October. And we look forward to people tuning in for that. If you'd like more information about how you could participate, please again email us through the website and we can provide information around that. I'd like to thank everybody that tuned in today for our first event. We've got a short survey at the end, which is 2 compulsory questions before you log off, and other questions that other 2 questions that provide us insight into what you would like to see. The more feedback you can give us on what we're doing well, the more we can improve, the more you can tell us about topics that you would like to hear us discuss on this forum. The advancement of migrant women from non-English speaking background, diversity and inclusion is something that everybody who tuned in here is exceptionally passionate about. The argument has been made that diversity increases productivity. So why is it taking so long for the needle to move? The needle moves when we all march together, we all have conversations like this, we all engage and we all participate. So I'd like to thank you for joining us this evening, and I look forward to chairing another one of these conversations at the end of October and hearing from some insightful women around their challenges, around their journey. To the panel and to everybody who participated in putting today's event together, thank you to our sponsors, the Queensland Government, Access Community Services, BMAC, to everybody. I don't have the sponsor sheet in front of me. So to everybody, CMS, our videographers, everybody who's working tirelessly behind the scenes to make this look like it's all seamless. Thank you for your time. Good night, everybody.